know it's been a minute, but welcome back. For those who do not know who I am, my name is Micah, and I'm going to teach you all about perversion. Over the past few weeks, we have been discussing perversion. I had took a small little break, but I'm back. Today's topic is perversion of the fallen angels and the corruption of the bloodline. Okay, so just to give you guys a recap of what we have discussed in the previous weeks, um, we had discussed perversion. What is perversion? Perversion is an alter of something from its original course, a distortion or corruption of what was first intended, a turning from the truth to change to something worse, a diverting from the true intent or purpose. It is important for us to be delivered from perversion because our lack of knowledge of a thing does not excuse us from punishment of sin. Hey y'all, jump on in, jump on in. So yes, it is important for us to be aware of perversion, because if we do not know what we are, if we do not know that we have perverse thoughts, perverse actions of these ways that could have been passed down through our bloodlines, then we will think that it's okay to live this way. And some of the things that we have discussed previously was that perversion of marriage or not marriage, fornication, adultery, of that sort. God created men and women so that we can procreate, so that we can reproduce in the earth, and that we were to become one. That was the whole purpose of man and woman joining together, not for us to make this a recreational activity, a hobby, or any sort of form. It was solely for us to become one with one partner, and then for us to procreate and bring life into the earth. Okay, and then the next thing that was perversion that we talked about was mankind was never created to be or have any relations with animals. As I stated in my previous lesson, as of 2024, laws have just been put in place in certain states, saying forbidding humans to have sex with animals. So this is not taboo. This is not something that does not happen, or it's just something that was so long ago or so foreign. No, this happens in our own country as well in other countries who think that it's okay to have relations with animals. But we were never created to do such a thing. It is wickedness. And in the book of Leviticus, it will say that you were to be put to death. But in today's world, we don't put anyone to death. Now we just basically get punished. You can get prison time or you can be fined for having relations with an animal. Okay, so those were the topics that we had discussed, and now we're going to discuss incest. Okay, so Adam and Eve was the first people who were ever created on earth, right? So they began having children, and their children and their children were having children. So it is obvious that they were relatives, right? So they were all relatives. So how did this thing become perverse? How did something that was natural to them become perverted, right? And perversion is a diverting from its original intent, right? So when that means it corrupts the original course, something had went wrong. What went wrong? So from my study, I believe that this wickedness came about, or this perversion came about in Genesis chapter 6. Okay? So in Genesis chapter 6, it says, when men began to increase in number on the earth, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God, which are fallen angels, saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they married any of them that they chose. So why do I say it started here? Well, in that same chapter, God says, the Lord saw how great man's wickedness on earth, and it's beginning at verse 5. So the sons of men, the sons of God, which is fallen angels, had took the women of men and start sleeping with them, basically marrying them, and they were never permitted to do so. But this is when God had saw that wickedness, he said great wickedness was on earth, and he said that every inclination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil all the time. And then it says the Lord was grieved that he had made man on the earth, and his heart was filled with pain. So the Lord said, I will wipe mankind whom I have created from the face of the earth. So Adam and Eve was already in sin, and they was already reproducing and having children, and their children was reproducing as well. It wasn't until the sons of God, which is fallen angels, diverted from the path, diverted from the truth, diverted from the command of God to not marry. They were never given in marriage. They were never supposed to be given in marriage, and they were never intended or created to be joined together with humans, because they are spirit beings, right? And we are humans. For God said in that same chapter, he says, after he said in verse 3 of Genesis 6, he says, then the Lord said, my spirit will not contend with man forever, for he is mortal. His days will be 120 years. So before then, men were living almost 900 years. But when God saw that the angels of God had come into the women, he had to put a cap on them, because now they are super beings. They are spiritual beings joined together with humans. Right? So now these are giants. Now these are men who was ruling over the earth, right? For he says their children were called the Nephilims. The Nephilim were, and they were on earth in those days and also afterward. He says, and when the sons of God went into the daughters of men and had children by them, they were the heroes of old, men of renown. So you know how we watch superhero movies, right? And they got this super strength. They're super fast. They are huge, or they're majestic beings. That's exactly what these children of the sons of God and the women that the women birth looked like. Basically, they had the the look of a human, but they were super, right? So that's why you call superheroes, right? So they were superhuman beings, right? So he says these were called heroes of old and men of renown. So these were men who believed themselves to be gods. You know how Pharaoh thought himself to be a god? It's possibly that he was a descendant of the Nephilims, that he was such in great stature that people thought that he was of God. He had different powers, or he had different abilities that regular humans did not have, that was not joined in marriage with these fallen angels. Okay? So this is perversion. Sons of God, which are angels, fallen angels, were never permitted to marry the daughters of men. Jesus tells us in Matthew 22, verse 30. He says, for in resurrection they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are as the angels of God in heaven. So he was talking to the Pharisees, or those who was asking about, trying to trip him up and say, well, who would this woman be, since she had married all the brothers? Right, when the day of your return. So Jesus tells them that she will be no one's wife. She will be, and he was saying that in the time when the day that I return, he said they, which is human, will neither marry nor would they be given in marriage. He said they will be as the angels of God in heaven. Okay, so angels are spirit beings, and we're not supposed to reproduce with humans. All right. And that is why God has said that my spirit will not contend with man. Right? So the word contend means to struggle, resist, to grapple with, to argue, to withstand. God gave rulership to men on earth who is made of flesh. So God is spirit. Is saying that I'm not going to contend with the flesh. I'm not going to continue to fight for rulership, fight for dominion, fight for power over the flesh. Though I gave dominion to men here on earth, what I have to do now is come into the earth in flesh form and gain power over and that's exactly what he did. He came into human form, which is flesh, and died, crucified the flesh, and reigned and rose himself again in spirit. Right? So that's how we are to do as well. We are to crucify this flesh, which is ruling here in dominion, and now allow the Spirit of God to rise in us to be ruler over the flesh. Okay, I know that's going to take us in a different direction, but I had to allow you guys to see what was the reason why God came to crucify the flesh, because the flesh has dominion in the earth. The flesh is what is blessed here on earth. So God had to come and crucify this flesh that was in power, in dominion here on earth, and God had to bring it into subjection to the Spirit of God, which is Him Himself. Okay. Moving on. So through this, the angels desired the women of men, and they stepped outside of their roles as spiritual beings to create hybrid humans, which were called Nephilims. And in Hebrew, this word is called fallen ones, or is defined as fallen ones. So they were the heroes of old, men of renown. They were men of great strength and great stature, giants and royal figures. These were kings that associated themselves as gods. Okay, so the people all looked up to them. The people made them their ruler. The people worshiped them. The people was fearful of them. Remember when God told the Israelites to go and get the land of Canaan? But the 12 spies came back. Only two gave a good report that we can the Lord has given us the land, we can defeat them. But the other 10 said, no, we can't beat them because we are like grasshoppers in their eyes. So they saw themselves as this tiny compared to these giants that's in the land, right? So that's exactly what they were. They were giants. They was huge. They was gigantic, right? They were considered the heroes of old. They associate themselves as God. In the eyes of men, they were so majestic, right? But in God's eyes, they were sinners. They were fallen ones. Okay? They was ripe for judgment. And that is why the Lord punished those fallen angels who have joined themselves with those women. They did not get to stay on earth. They were condemned to darkness, chained up until the day of judgment. So they're still in darkness, they're still chained up. But the descendants, the birth of those babies were still here on earth. Okay? They didn't get chained up, they didn't get cast out. It was the angels who actually committed the sin by actually going into those women to give birth to those fallen ones, right? The descendants of the fallen ones. Okay? So the Lord saw how great this wickedness was, and he became grieved with man on earth. So the Lord said, I will wipe all mankind whom I have created from the face of the earth. And this is where the extreme wickedness began, in the corruption of the bloodline. So you might say, well, how did this relate to incest? How did this connect with incest? So God has said that their minds, he said, every inclination of their thoughts. So the things that they thought of was wicked. Everything in their heart was wicked. So this perverseness, this way of thinking, their behaviors was all corrupt. Their desires was corrupt. So this corruption was passed down through generations. Okay? This corruption was passed down through generation, through the bloodline. And it was passed down through the bloodline of the fathers, which is dominant according to our DNA, right? So the father's blood is dominant over the woman's blood. And this is why Jesus did not have an earthly father here on earth, because, well, he had Joseph, which is his stepfather, but he did not have his blood, right? He had the blood of the father, which is reason being is because he needed his blood to remain pure. Okay, so that is why the blood of Jesus is the only blood that is pure, because it comes from his father, who is holy, who is pure. And we have our descent, we have our own father's blood and our ancestors' blood running through us, which is ancient. That is why when we go to the hospital, they ask you what runs in your bloodline, what sickness runs in your bloodline, what disease runs in your bloodline, what is hereditary, meaning your bloodline has a pattern of sickness. Your bloodline has a pattern of disease, right? So that is why, that is how we are connected to all the way back to the ancient, from Adam and Eve, all the way from the very beginning. So that is why we need the blood of Jesus to give us a new covenant, a new blood to purify us, because our blood is sinful, but the blood of Jesus is not. Okay? So moving on. All right? So the Nephilims were on earth in those days of Noah. Also, they were, as stated in Genesis 6, verse 4, he said that they was there afterwards. And God saved Noah and his sons and his daughters-in-laws. We do not know if their blood was mixed with the Nephilim. We do not know if they were mixed with the bloodline of the fallen angels, their descendants. Most likely because, like I said, they were showing up later down in the Bible, in the scriptures. David fought Goliath, and he was a giant. So that lets us know that they were still roaming around. They were still in the bloodline. Maybe they skipped a generation or two, but they still was able to produce that same corrupt descendant. Okay? Moreover, in Genesis chapter 9:22, it tells us that Ham, the son of Noah, saw his father's nakedness, and he told his two brothers. Another translation says that Ham gazed upon his father's nakedness. Now, that word gaze means to look for a long period of time, to stare at. Okay, so mind you, his father is a male, Ham is a male. Okay, so when it says that he gazed upon his father, that means we don't know, it doesn't reveal to us what he was thinking, but it's possible that his thoughts was corrupt, because he sat there and stared at his father's nakedness, and instead of him covering him, he left out to go tell his brothers. Now just imagine what kind of conversation he was having. So for him to go and tell his brothers, that means that he was having he had perverse language coming out of his mouth. The words that he was speaking out of his mouth was perverse, because he came up to his brothers to talk about his dad's nakedness. So what did he say? We don't know. Maybe he was laughing and joking about, oh, look at dad, look, he had this and he had that, right? Instead of covering his dad. So that is why the two other brothers came in to cover him, but they also looked away so that they would not look upon their father. Because when we're exposed to certain things, it causes our minds to think a certain way. Ham was exposed to his father's nakedness, and he stared at his father's nakedness. It's possible that he was also thinking negatively. It's also that he was thinking perversely after seeing his father's nakedness. Like when you see someone of the same sex, a child more likely, see someone of the same sex and they doing kissing and stuff, they're confused about why they're doing that. They said, aren't there two girls? Aren't there two boys, right? But because, and more than likely, that as they begin to process that over and over, and they see it more than normal, then they're going to think that that's okay. Okay, their thoughts begin to be perverse, begins to be perverted from its original intent. It means it takes a wrong turn. Okay, so I want to talk to you all also about the desire that they had. So incest is rooted in lust. incest is rooted in lust. So this is how it all began. This same lust was found with Eve. In Genesis chapter 3, verse 6, it says, when the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye and also desirable. Let's take a pause there. So God says the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eye, and the pride of life. Right? So this means that lust was in this world the minute sin was conceived. Okay? So it was the lust, she had the lustful desire to eat of the fruit. So what did she do when she had this lustful desire? She took of it and she ate it. Now let's read in Genesis 6 when the fallen angels saw the daughters of sons of men. It says, as they began to multiply on the face of the land, the daughters were born to them, and the sons of God saw, once again, the lust of the eye, saw that the daughters were desirable, and they took wives for themselves whomever they chose and desired. So they didn't just pick one, they picked multiple ones, and anyone that they desired, they chose them and they slept with them. Right? So as we can see, the lust of the eye has caused us to sin. That's why God said, if your eye calls you to sin, gouge it out. Get rid of it. So this is what's happening this is what happened to Eve, and this is now what happened to the fallen sons of God, which are angels. So lust is a sin of the flesh, and it can show up in many different ways. In these 2 chapters, it shows up as food. What do we see when we see food? We say, oh, that looks good. It looks desirable. It looks good to eat, right? And then it also shows up in knowledge. It showed up as knowledge. We want wisdom. We want to gain more understanding and more knowledge. And it showed up as sex, marriage, lusting after women, lusting after men, lusting after marriage, right? This is what happened when we allow lustful desires to take over us. Now we're in sin. In Genesis 4 and 6, God tells Cain, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you. So God tells us to delight ourselves in the Lord, and he will give us the desires of our heart, right? So that means when we delight ourselves in God, he will give us the right desires. Here we see that our desires, our fleshly desires, are corrupt. They're sinful. But God tells us to delight ourselves in him so that he can give us the desires of our heart, meaning that he will purify our desires. Here in Genesis 4, God tells Cain that sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, meaning it's a longing for you, a deep passion for you. When we have desires, we are longing for that thing, right? We desire to have it. We want to take hold of it, right? And that's the same thing Eve did. She took hold of it. That's the same thing the fallen angels did. They took hold of it. And that's the same thing sin has done to Cain when he killed his brother Abel. For God tells him that it desires to have you, but you must master it. Okay? And you must master it. His desire for validation caused him to kill his own brother. His desire for approval caused him to kill his own brother. It was rooted in jealousy and envy. Okay? And then in Luke chapter 22, verse 31, Jesus tells Peter, who is his disciple, he says, Simon, Simon, behold, Satan has desired to have you, that he may shift you as wheat. So this desire here is a desire to have permission to test him, a desire to have authority and power over him. So he says, let's see if he's really going to be faithful to you. Let me shift him to see if he's truly who he says he is as a disciple of the Lord. Right? And the same power, the same permission, the same authority is what King David had when he desired for Bathsheba. He didn't care about the fact that she was a married woman. All he knew was that he was in position of authority, that he ruled as king, and he can have anyone that he wanted. So that caused him to sin in adultery and also murder by murdering her husband. You see how this wrong desire, this longing, this passion could cause us to be so corrupt? So this is why we ought to delight ourselves in the Lord, so that he can give us the desires of our hearts, so that he can prune them, so he can turn them in the right direction. And that same, so I'm trying to show you guys a pattern, a bloodline of corruption. So David had this desire, this strong desire for Bathsheba, and if you want to go deeply, you can honestly say that he raped her, right? That he took her and he took her for himself, even though that she was against her will. She did not agree to do so. It was because he was a king. He took her from her home and slept with her. Now let me show you how this corruption is running in the bloodline. His own son Ammon desired his sister Tamar, his half sister Tamar. Right? He desired her so much that he became sick, that he became ill, because he felt like he couldn't do absolutely nothing unless he got a hold of her. So he devised a plan, just like his father David devised a plan to kill Bathsheba's husband so that he can have her. Guess what he does to guess what Ammon does to his sister? He devised a plan, get her to come to his home and cook for him. And then he takes her and sleeps with her. Well, rape her. That's what happened. That's what happened. That's what happens when sin is rooted in lust, or when desires are rooted in lust. You do the wrong thing. So I can go on and reveal to you a pattern of corruption in the bloodline from lustful desires. Lot, which is Abraham's nephew, his daughters slept with their own dad. Why? Because they perceived that it was no more men for them to be able to procreate with. So they had the wrong desire, they had the wrong mindset, and said, how about we just get our father drunk and we go and lie down with him at night, and we're able to continue on our father's bloodline. Don't you see the perversity of our thoughts? And once again, I believe that it began here with the Nephilims, with the fallen angels, the fallen ones, because this is when God said that he needed to get rid of everybody. He needed to wipe us out. But somehow, when he decided to keep Noah and Noah's household, it's possible that they was already pervert, that they was already that their bloodline was already corrupt. And as we see, his son Ham had a perverse mindset. Like I said, it can skip a generation. It doesn't necessarily mean that everyone is going to be affected by it, but it also means that it's running through the bloodline. So that's what I had to share with you all today about perversion. And like I said, perversion is a diverting from the truth, right? It is a distortion or corruption of what was first intended. God created Adam and Eve to procreate. They were all relatives. So it wasn't abnormal for them to procreate, but it wasn't until something sinful had came into the world that caused them to have perverse mindsets, to whereas that their desires for their siblings, or their desires for their aunts and uncle, their dad, their aunts, their mom, whomever, was corrupt. It was rooted in evil. Like I said, men and women were only put together to procreate, to produce more life. But when your desire was just to have them, not to marry, not to fulfill the will of God, but just to have them, then your desire is corrupted. Sex is not a recreational activity. That is not a hobby. It's not something that you're just supposed to be entertaining. It is sacred. And though these was fallen angels, meaning that they was no longer a part of God's kingdom, they still was under the command of God. They was still under the authority of God. Because Jesus said in John 14 verse 6, he says, I am the way and the truth and the life. The truth is that the angels knew the truth about them not being able to marry. Fallen angels or not, though they was not a part of God's kingdom anymore, and they was cast out on here on earth, they still did not have permission to lie with the women of men. So that lets us know that they decided to go their own path. They decided to divert from the truth. And this is why they were immediately condemned to darkness, chained and waiting for the day of judgment. Perversion is turning away from the truth. The sons of God prove that they turned away from the truth. The truth is God. So they turned away from his authority, turned away from his command, and decided to do what they wanted to do, which was marry the daughters of men, as many as they chose. So that is the message that I have for you guys today. I pray that this was informative. I pray that you guys was able to understand what it means to have a perverse mindset, what it means to have perverted ways, and what is perversion. And if you're doing something and it's perverted from the original course, then it is perversion. If it is not what God intended, it is perversion. It's simple as that. And I'm going to go ahead and read the definition again. It says perversion is an alter of something. If you change something, if you alter it, perversion. A distortion or corruption of what it first was intended for. If you corrupt it, if you change it, if you go in, how they say you jailbreak something, you done changed up the course of a thing, right? You done planted something else inside of it. Okay? A turning from the truth, meaning you know the right thing to do, but you choose to do the wrong thing. You choose to do the opposite. Turning from the truth, meaning that though you know what you ought to do, you forsake the truth and you believe the lies, or you what is it I'm trying to say, you participate in wrongdoing. That's not what I was trying to say, but that's also one thing you do, to turning from the truth. And it says to change something for worse. Something God said men were good, right? That's what he said. He said we were good. He was joyful that he had created us. But then somehow we became corrupt, to where he was grieved of us, to where he was full of pain for us. For it says in Genesis chapter 1 verse 31, it says God created man and he made him in his likeness. He created male and female and he blessed them. And he said to them, be fruitful and increase in number. Fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over every living creature. And then God saw all that he had made, and it was very good. We are good. That's what our original intent is, to be good. That's what God created us to be, was good. He said very good. He was very pleased with us. But it wasn't until this corruption came in Genesis chapter 6 with the fallen angels, where he was completely grieved, where he said man has been, he said, greatly wicked. That means that it was no turning from. That's why he had to get rid of us. Because he said it is so terribly wicked. And as of today, we can see that the world is terribly wicked again. But when he returned, it's not going to be the same. It's not going to be the same way it once was. It's either you with me or you're not. That's it. Okay, guys, I know I was on here for a minute, but I'm gonna get off. So like I said, share this video, like, comment, let some people know what's going on, what perversion is, so that they can get themselves back in alignment, so they can get themselves back in the will of God, to be good, like God said that we are good. I desire to be good. Your heart, change your heart's desire to be bad. Turn your heart's desire from doing the wrong things of corruption. Desire to be good, desire to be pure, desire to be holy. Trust me, it's the best thing that you can ever desire to be. All right, guys, so I'll talk to you guys later. Love you guys. God is love. Remember that no one is greater than God, and absolutely nothing that you have ever done will keep you from the love of God, will keep you from being saved from God, for nothing is too hard for him. He loves you. I love you. Y'all be blessed. Bye.